You can't be serious. Marcus stared at me across our kitchen island, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. You're leaving Apex Tech? For what? Some pipe dream startup? I stood my ground, gripping the resignation letter in my hand. It's not a pipe dream. I've been developing the software for 2 years. The prototype works. The market research is solid. And? Market research, he laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Olivia, you're a product manager, not a CEO. Do you have any idea how many startups fail in their first year? My name is Olivia Chen, and at 35, I was about to leave my comfortable 6-figure job to pursue something I've been quietly building nights and weekends. Something that could revolutionize how small businesses handle their operations. Something that my husband apparently thought was a joke. I know exactly how many fail, I said, keeping my voice steady. I also know why they fail, and I've planned for every contingency. Marcus set his cup down with a sharp click. Have you planned for what happens when you burn through our savings? When you can't make the mortgage payments on this house? I'm not touching our joint savings, I replied. I've been building my own fund for this, and I've already secured seed funding. That got his attention. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. What seed funding? From who? Victoria Martinez. Your old college roommate? He scoffed. The one who inherited her father's venture capital firm? This gets better and better. So you're not just risking everything on a whim. You're doing it with nepotism money. I felt my face flush with anger. Victoria invested because she believes in the product. She's seen the prototype, unlike you, since you've never bothered to look at what I've been working on. It was true. For 2 years, I'd worked late into the night, building and testing my software platform. Marcus had barely noticed, too absorbed in his own career as a senior executive at one of the city's biggest tech companies. He'd assumed I was just working late for Apex, never questioning why I was so engrossed in my laptop during weekends, or why I had turned our home office into a makeshift development studio. Fine, he said, standing up and straightening his designer tie. Throw away your career, but don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. And don't expect me to bail you out. He grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door, then paused. You'll be back in 6 months, begging for your old position. Mark my words. The door slammed behind him, leaving me alone in our expensively furnished kitchen. I looked around at the life we'd built, the sub-zero refrigerator Marcus had insisted on, the Italian marble countertops, the view of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. All symbols of success. But whose success? I pulled out my phone and called Victoria. Ready to change the world. She answered on the first ring. More than ever, I replied, my voice stronger than I felt. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I officially resigned from Apex, ignoring the pitying looks from colleagues who'd heard through the grapevine that I was leaving to start my own company. I secured a small office space. Nothing fancy, just a basic setup with good internet and enough room for the small team I planned to build. Marcus's attitude shifted from dismissive to coldly distant. He started working later, missing dinners, treating me like I'd already failed. One evening, as I sat at our dining table reviewing potential hire resumes, he dropped a newspaper in front of me. Thought you might find this interesting, he said with a smirk. The article was about a failed tech startup, its founder now bankrupt and facing lawsuits. I pushed the paper aside without commenting. I wasn't going to let him shake my confidence, not when I was so close to launch. Victoria proved to be more than just an investor. She became my sounding board, my advocate, and sometimes my voice of reason. When I wanted to rush the launch, she made me step back and test more thoroughly. When I doubted myself, she reminded me why we'd invested in the first place. Your husband's an idiot, she told me bluntly over coffee one morning. He can't see past his own ego to recognize what you're building. 3 months in, we hired our first employees, a brilliant developer named Raj who left Google to join us, and Sarah, a marketing whiz who believed in our vision. Our little office started to feel alive with possibility. The day we launched our beta version, Marcus didn't come home. He texted at midnight. Working late. Don't wait up. I didn't tell him about the 50 small businesses that had signed up for our trial in the first day alone. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Our first major bug sent me into a panic, keeping me at the office for 48 hours straight until we fixed it. When I finally came home, exhausted but relieved, Marcus was waiting. Having fun playing entrepreneur, he asked, not looking up from his phone. I saw Amy from Apex today. Your old position is still open, by the way. Just saying. I ignored him and went straight to shower, letting the hot water wash away his words. What Marcus didn't know was that while he was trying to tear me down, our beta users were raving about the platform. Small business owners were calling it a game changer. We were onto something big. 6 months passed, the deadline Marcus had given for my failure. Instead of crawling back to Apex, I was in the middle of our series of funding round. Victoria had introduced me to other investors, and the interest was overwhelming. The morning of our biggest pitch meeting, Marcus finally asked about the company. He'd seen something online, a mention in a tech blog about promising startups to watch. So, he said, trying to sound casual, how many users do you actually have? I looked at him over my coffee cup, remembering all the snide comments, the dismissal, the constant predictions of failure. Enough, I replied simply and headed out the door. That night, as I sat in my office late, staring at the city lights, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I clicked it and felt my heart stop. Major layoffs hit tech sector. Quantum Solutions announces 30% workforce reduction. Quantum Solutions, Marcus's company. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from him. We need to talk. I stared at the message, thinking about all the times he belittled my dreams, dismissed my abilities, assumed I'd fail. Now, as my company was on the verge of something huge, his carefully constructed world was crumbling. The question was, what would I do about it? I didn't go home that night. Instead, I stayed in my office, watching our latest user statistics roll in. We crossed 10,000 active businesses on the platform, with a 98% retention rate. The numbers that had once seemed impossible were now reality, growing larger every day. Around midnight, Victoria called. Have you seen the news about Quantum? She asked without preamble. Yes, I replied, still staring at my computer screen. Marcus texted. He wants to talk. She was quiet for a moment. You know he's going to ask for a job. I know. And? I leaned back in my chair, thinking about the last year. The snide comments, the constant undermining, the absolute certainty that I would fail. I haven't decided yet. The next morning, I finally went home to change clothes. Marcus was waiting, sitting at the kitchen island where this had all started a year ago. He looked different, rumpled, uncertain, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. Liv, he started, using my old nickname for the first time in months. About last night. You got laid off, I said simply, heading for the coffee maker. He nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Along with half my department, no warning, no severance beyond the minimum. They're saying it's market conditions, but really it's because Quantum failed to innovate, I finished. They got comfortable, stuck in their ways, convinced they were too big to fail. Sound familiar? He flinched at my tone. Look, I know I haven't been supportive, but I've been thinking. Your company, it's doing well, isn't it? Really well. I poured my coffee, taking my time before answering. We're closing our Series A next week. $50 million at a $100 million valuation. His eyes widened. The numbers were bigger than he'd imagined, I could tell. That's impressive. And you're expanding, right? Looking for experienced executives? And there it was. Not an apology, not an admission that he'd been wrong. Just an assumption that now that he needed something, all would be forgiven. We are hiring, I said carefully, but I'm not sure you'd be a good fit. Not a good fit. He stood up, anger flashing across his face. I have 15 years of experience in tech. I've managed teams bigger than your entire company. Exactly, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. You're used to a different world, Marcus. One where success means maintaining the status quo, where innovation is just a buzzword in quarterly reports. That's not fair, isn't it? I cut him off. Tell me, in all the time I was building this company, did you once ask to see what I was working on? Did you ever consider that maybe, just maybe, I knew what I was doing? He fell silent, and I continued. You know what our company culture is built on? Respect, innovation, actually listening to our customers instead of telling them what they need. Can you honestly say you embody any of those values? I can learn, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Like you learned to support your wife? To believe in her dreams? I shook my head. I don't think so. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, then paused. You know what the funny thing is? If you had believed in me from the start, you probably would have been my co-founder. We could have built this together. Instead what? Instead, I built something better than I ever imagined, precisely because I didn't have you holding me back. The next week, our series of funding closed oversubscribed. The tech press was calling us the next big thing in business software, and our user growth was exceeding all projections. I moved into a new office, a whole floor in a downtown high-rise with views of the bay. Marcus moved out of our house the same day. I need space to figure things out, he said. We both knew the truth. He couldn't handle living with my success, couldn't bear the daily reminder of how wrong he'd been. 3 months later, I received divorce papers. The same day, Forbes published an article about our company, From Zero to $100 million. How Olivia Chen is revolutionizing small business software. Victoria framed the article and hung it in my office. Consider it a divorce present, she said with a grin. As I sat in my office that evening, looking at the frame, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Congratulations on Forbes. I was wrong about you. About everything. I started to reply, then stopped. What was there to say? He had been wrong. About me, about my dreams, about his own superiority. But his validation didn't matter anymore. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Raj, our first employee, now our CTO. The new feature's ready for testing, he said excitedly. Want to take it for a spin? I smiled, setting my phone aside without responding to Marcus's text. Show me what you've got. As Raj walked me through the new functionality, I thought about how far we'd come, from a pipe dream startup to a company valued at $100 million, from a team of 3 to over 100 employees, from being dismissed by my husband to being featured in Forbes. The real victory wasn't proving Marcus wrong. It was proving myself right. A year later, at our company's anniversary celebration, I stood on stage looking out at hundreds of employees. Bright, passionate people who'd chosen to believe in our vision. The slides behind me showed our latest numbers. Over 100,000 businesses using our platform, $150 million in annual recurring revenue, offices in 3 countries. Success isn't about proving critics wrong, I told them. It's about proving believers right. Every small business owner who trusted us with their operations, every employee who took a chance on a startup, every investor who saw our potential. They're the ones who made this possible. After the ceremony, Victoria handed me an envelope. Inside was a clipping from the local business journal. Quantum Solutions files for bankruptcy. Former executives face scrutiny. Karma's a funny thing, she said with a smirk. I tucked the clipping away without comment. Marcus's failure wasn't my concern anymore. I had a company to run, employees who counted on me, and customers who believed in what we were building. That evening, as I walked through our office, I passed the wall where we displayed our company values. At the top was the one I'd chosen first, the one that meant the most to me. Believe in possibility. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, standing in my kitchen clutching a resignation letter while my husband laughed at my dreams. She believed in possibility even when no one else did. And that had made all the difference.